Hello, welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson. Now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. We've got an excellent podcast for you as we're going to be joined in a few minutes by one of our good friends, Ivetta Abramyan. She does such great work over at Bracketeer.org with one of our other good friends, Rocco Miller, looking at this great sport of college basketball. She's based out there in the Florida area, so we're going to be talking about some of the big moves that we've seen in the ACC here in the offseason, certainly what Louisville has been able to do over the last few days, and this is something that I'm going to talk about today, and this is something that I'm going to talk about a little bit more moving forward. A lot of these teams having a bit of a philosophy change. We've seen that with Tennessee to the opposite, because with the success that we've seen for a lot of these teams from last season, because with Arizona, Michigan doing such a great job with their low post play, we're seeing a lot of teams trying to go a little bit bigger this offseason. We're certainly seeing that with Louisville, but we're also seeing the opposite from Tennessee, a team that is always based around good defense, good low post play. They've really went out there and they've decided that they're going to be investing a lot in their guards. They're going to be getting a lot of scoring. We saw that with the signing of Juke Harris a few days ago, so I think that that's a very interesting sort of philosophy shift there. We'll be talking to Ivetta about those moves. I know that she has a little bit of affinity for mid-majors, so we'll talk about the NCAA Tournament field expanding to 76 teams, a few teams out there in the American, and so much more. Then in the final segment, I'm going to get you guys a recap of the news and notes we saw in college basketball on Tuesday. If you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, largely, the name does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline, and the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated, and then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. While I did not get in any Twitter/X questions today, we are starting to see things fall into place a little bit more for many of these rosters, and the transfer portal is starting to slow down. So those final segments where I recap the news and notes in college basketball, they're much below 30 minutes right now. They're still getting quite a few moves, and I do think that, as I was mentioning last week, this is really going to be a month where we see these mid-major rosters that maybe are a little bit incomplete. These guys that fell through the cracks, they land with some of these good mid-major teams. I think that they are really going to be able to form themselves right about now. We've seen a few teams like High Point, Long Island, they've been able to do a solid job here in the offseason, but I think that these teams are going to get on the board more. We still are waiting to see what the heck LSU is going to be doing, because, again, I mentioned it on the podcast many times, and you'll hear me talk about it until there's a signing. You've got Mohamed Diabate on the roster for LSU, and well, you've got a Mohamed Diabate on the roster, and that's about it. So that's one of the biggest storylines in college basketball right now, but certainly I do think that these mid-major teams are going to be able to get up on the board. We did see a lot of that for Tuesday, getting a little bit of a shorter introduction here today, mainly because we just didn't have that big piece of news, unlike when Juke Harris was signing about 48 or so hours ago with Tennessee, what have you, but we do have ourselves a great podcast, and Ivetta, she's going to help make it so great. She's joining me next, ready on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now a part of the VSiN family of podcasts. Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN, because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. Always great to be joined by this lady as Ivetta Abramyan. She's doing such great work over at our good friend Rocco Miller's website, bracketeer.org. She's doing an incredible job keeping notes of everything that we're seeing in college basketball during the season. She does a great job handicapping games, and she does a great job going out to games as well. She's always got her arena tour, which is always a lot of fun. And here in the off season, she's been doing a great job gathering all that we've been seeing with the 100 million ability moves that we've been seeing across the sport. You're able to follow her on the old Twitter/X at Ivetta Abramyan. That last name is spelled Abramyan at Ivetta. It's great to be able to get you aboard. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Greg. Always so happy to be here. Great chatting hoops with you. We are getting down to the wire. The rosters are just about filled up, and we're starting to finally, I guess, kind of get a sense for the big picture here.
Absolutely, we are. And most of the rosters are getting all taken care of. Right now, LSU, I have no idea how they're going to be able to fill out that roster, but you know what? Most of these teams, they're doing a great job of filling it out, and we saw it over the weekend. Louisville, they were able to pick up a five-star guy, and they have been one of those teams that have been able to fill it out. Really, a lot of those teams out there in the southeast part of the country, they have been very active here in the transfer portal. And how do you take a look at this Louisville team now that they had the 7-footer in Obina Okenzie, who is a top 5 guy in the class of 2027 who reclassified? Because for Louisville, I am very bullish on what they've got. It also feels like at the same time, it might be a little bit of a different roster than in the past, because I just don't see this team taking the same percentage of shots from 3-point range as they did in the past. Feels like they're built a little bit more with their low post play with the commitment of Okenzie along with Flory Badunga coming over.
I agree 100%. I echo everything you just said. They definitely crushed it this offseason, but it's a very different look team, like you said. So adding a 5-star freshman to this top-ranked transfer class is just insane. So the expectations are set very high by all the hype around this, what some are saying is a $25 million roster. So if they don't make it to the Elite Eight, I think they're going to catch the same flack that Kentucky got for their $22 million roster, just because the expectations are just so high. I like the moves that they made. They're attempting to fix that weak interior presence they had last season, and they just loaded up that front court. With that said, Kelsey's going to have to switch things up to complement the bigs. Like you, I also expect their scoring output to decrease unless they can land another productive guard, but it should be absolutely fun to watch. So we'll see if they can actually live up to these preseason expectations.
Yep, it is going to be really interesting out there in an ACC that I don't know if you agree with this or not, but I feel like the last 2 off seasons have been good for them. The hirings that we saw of Jay Lucas over at Miami last off season, along with Ryan Odom over at Virginia, really got the ball rolling. And then here in this off season, we're seeing Louisville spending a bunch of money. Boston College has actually decided to stick resources into basketball, which is great. Syracuse bringing in Jerry McNamara. I just feel like the entire ACC, while they're not maybe on par with like the SEC and the Big Ten, they've taken steps in the right direction, in my opinion.
Yes, I agree. Florida State, my alma mater, much better this offseason. Obviously, what we saw last year was Luke's first year, so that's understandable. He had to kind of get his bearings, and he's got a little bit more resources this year, and then actually getting all of his own guys. So I'm really excited about that. I think they could use a little bit more size, but it's already light years better than what it was last year. Another interesting ACC team is Virginia, because they are actually returning 83% of their minutes are expected to be allocated to returning players based on their current roster, if their current roster stands. So I thought that was interesting as well. So I think the ACC should be pretty competitive next season, just based on what they have going on. So yeah, I'm excited. It's nice when the rest of the ACC is good. When it's just Duke and maybe 1 or 2 other teams, it's just not as fun. I don't know. It's just not the same. It is fun when you have a good, kind of a decent ACC from top to bottom.
Oh, I agree with you there. And Duke certainly still looks like they're going to be the big bad wolf with everything that they're bringing in. My goodness, it's going to be hard to be able to dethrone them, but at the very least, a lot more respectability across the conference, as Ivetta Abramyan does great work over at bracketeer.org. Joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And No doubt about it. Tennessee, they certainly have turned over a little bit of a new leaf. This is not your father's Tennessee, to say the least. Typically, they're built around a bunch of big men, and then maybe have like one player, like a Dalton Connect or something like that, who's able to score. They have really went for it here in the offseason. We were talking about the ACC. They pick up Juke Harris, who is a 20-point per game scorer over at Wake Forest last season. Obviously, they had made so many moves previous to that, bringing in Terrence Hill Jr., Jalen Harrelson, list goes on. And just how do you take a look at this Tennessee team? One that I think is probably still going to be behind Florida. I love what they've done here in the offseason, but all in all, I am very stunned that Tennessee has made these moves, but I think that they've got the makings of a really good roster as well.
Yeah, I agree. And you hit the nail on the head because I never really thought about this, but you're right. They always kind of just have the one guy, they just have their one star player. It's been like this since the beginning of time, right? They always have one really great player, but they just don't have, occasionally they'll have some good support players, but it's one of those things where they haven't had what it takes to get over the hump. So I think this year they're just going pedal to the metal. They hit it out of the park. They've got scorers galore. I mean, Juke Harris was a huge addition for them. Their transfer portal class, Greg, averages 107 points per game. I mean, just insane. They're going to be an offensive machine, and they're going to have the depth to hopefully make another deep run in the tournament. My only concern is their lack of size. But otherwise, I think Rick Barnes could have a Final Four caliber team here and a great shot to finally break through that glass ceiling. So I think it's kind of like one of those if now or never situations. So they're just putting all their resources in, and I really want that for them. I think they're just so overdue, and it would just be nice to see Rick Barnes, get them to a Final Four.
Yep, it really would be. And at the very least, they've been able to make the Elite Eight here in the last few seasons. So that has been very much steps in the right direction for them. And we've been seeing them make a lot of great moves here in the offseason. And then I think that it's really interesting to look at some of these teams that maybe their work is not done. Like, I look at a few teams out there in the SEC. We just mentioned the fact that Tennessee has done an amazing job here in the offseason. Florida, without question, has as well. But it just feels like Kentucky has swung and missed on a lot of guys. I feel like they might be hoping to be able to sign a guy that's currently in the NBA draft or something like that, or go international. And then with LSU, I don't know if you have any idea what's going on there, but I see a roster with Mohamed Diabate on there, and they have Mohamed Diabate. That is the end of the list for them.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. The SEC is going to be interesting because, with Mark Pope, he's got his famous whiff list that circulates on social media, and people are constantly just updating his whiff list, all the guys he's had on campus and just failed to close the deal on. So they've got to get Momcilovic. I mean, he fits what they need perfectly. They need that scoring wing. They've got a hole there. They've got the money. They've got to find a way to convince him to come back. I think out of all the guys that have entered the draft, I think he's probably their best chance. Even then, I don't know if that'll be enough of an impact, but I feel like they have to try, right? Unless they're reserving that for someone else. I don't know. But Kentucky should be interesting. Obviously, speaking of the SEC, Florida's reloaded as well. I'm still a little worried about their guard position. They're not going to have any issues in the front court. And like you, I don't know what's going on with LSU. So we'll have to see. We'll have to wait and see.
Yep, no question about it. That's been interesting to be able to take a look at. And I know that you're out there in American country as well. You're pretty close to Florida Atlantic. And how have you been taking a look at the American? Because Florida Atlantic, I think, has made some moves. And I know one team in particular that's been catching your attention here over the last few weeks has been the Wichita State Shockers, who it's not like they've had a massive quantity of transfers, but I feel like the quality has been pretty solid.
Yeah, they're kind of flying under the radar, if you can say that. I mean, they've been decent. They haven't really made any significant waves, but they've been decent, and their retention is just phenomenal. They retained 10 of 12 eligible players. They have 3 centers in Berg, Hill, and Malonga. And then they have one roster spot left as of the last time I checked. So I'm not sure what they're going to do with that, but phenomenal retention for the Shockers. It'll be fun to see how those lineups materialize, but I'm assuming Hill and Malonga are going to back up Berg. They also have a handful of talented shooters led by Jordan Fryson and Jahari Long. So I'm really excited to see this team. And honestly, I'm just excited for the Shockers to return back to their glory days. I know Memphis and FAU have always been, just kind of the front runners of the American, at least in recent years. I feel like they've been building something just as a program. They've just been building Shocker Nation back to, it's 2013 caliber years. So I'm excited to see that, and I hope that happens. And some of these years where Memphis and FAU kind of have a little bit of a lull where they're not as strong and as dominant, I feel like these are the years that Wichita State can really make some waves. So I'm really excited to see them. I hope that this is a good cohesive group, and I hope to see them in the tournament next season.
Yep, I do as well. And you bring up the tournament, and I hate to do it, but I know that we both have some thoughts on the NCAA tournament expanding to 76 teams, and I want to get yours because there are some people that think that this might be helping out some mid-majors. Seems as though this is a ploy to be able to get more power conference teams in the NCAA tournament, but do want to get your thoughts because barring something very, very extreme, seems as though we're going from 68 to 76 for the upcoming season.
So my biggest issue with NCAA leadership is that they don't appear to ever think things through in their entirety. And the consequences of their permanent actions, right, just seem to spiral out of control. So you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. And we saw this countless times now. The NIL and transfer portal implementation was a disaster. They lost control of the college football postseason years ago. The men's basketball tournament is the only thing making them money. And if theoretically the power conferences created their own tournament, it would destroy one of America's greatest institutions. So I can see why they're trying to appease to the most powerful people in college sports by giving their mediocre teams more inclusion for monetary purposes, of course. And it's not going to affect revenue much early on, but their CBS Turner contract is up in 2032, and it's a financial incentive to expand their inventory. I can see why they're doing it. The rationale doesn't make sense. And anybody who says, even the coaches that say, oh, this is good for mid-majors or whatever, I mean, they're not being truthful with themselves because the system is already so stacked against mid-majors that inequity is growing every day. The current system already favors high majors with regards to metrics, scheduling advantages, perception, just the optics. Look at what happened in 2024 with the UNC selection. Matt Painter said it best. He said, the thing that always puzzles me is the reason why you use a variable to keep somebody out has got to be the same variable why you put somebody in. I just don't like the selective picking of variables. So they're already stacking the deck against the mid-majors. And we always say that the magic of March Madness is David getting a shot to take down Goliath. But with expansion, you have 4 teams from one bid leagues who will likely be excluded from the field. And then all the 11 seeds and half of the 12 seeds will likely be play-in winners. So that's going to bump down the auto bid teams that we rely on for upsets. And the average margin of victory this year in the first round was 17 points. We're already constantly complaining about bubble teams. It's just going to get worse. On top of that, you're watering down the regular season. Right? So the regular season needs to matter. The regular season needs to matter. We have 365 teams. I understand what's done is done. I guess we have to adapt and move on. I've already had my grieving process, so I'm already on the last stage of grief. I'm at the acceptance phase now, just because we knew this was coming down the pipe. But for the sake and dignity of the best postseason in all of sports, I just hope that they can execute it as cleanly as possible. It's not going to do it justice because they've already made the change, but I just hope it mitigates some of the issues that have been introduced as a result of these changes, and they just don't let it spiral out of control like they have with some of these other things that they've implemented.
Yep, it certainly does feel like it's going to be a bit rough moving forward with that. And you said it so well. I know there are some people that are excited that perhaps one or two more mid-majors getting the NCAA tournament, but feels like we're going to be getting a lot of those power conference teams. And I keep saying this, we had a tough enough time finding 68 teams for the 2026 NCAA tournament. So we're going to be doing mental gymnastics to see what we all get for this upcoming season. But we know exactly what we're going to get from you, Ivetta. Always great knowledge, always doing a great job keeping your finger on the pulse of everything college basketball. Let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Thanks again, Greg. You can find me on Twitter at Ivetta Abramyan, IVETTA ABRAMYAN. Really excited. We're wrapping up our rosters here, and we're about to just dive headfirst into scheduling season. So that's kind of the next fun part of the off season. As we'll start. Well, it's already started, but we're going to start revealing more non-conference games here. So that's always fun. And then November will be here before you know it. So thank you again, Greg. Always appreciate it. Always look forward to the next one.
Yep, absolutely. Ivetta is doing such a great job day in and day out, keeping her finger on the pulse of all that we're seeing in college basketball, keeping everything straight for us every single time she joins me. Learn such great insights. So big thanks to Ivetta for joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And coming up next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you a recap of the news and notes that we saw in college basketball over the last 24 hours. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peters, and now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by Ivetta Abramyan, who's doing such great work over at Bracketeer.org. All those folks over there at Bracketeer.org are amazing. That's why they are frequent guests on this podcast. They're looking at this sport all 12 months out of the year. They truly love this game, and they love being able to share their knowledge of it. And every single time she joins me, lends such great insights. So big thanks to Ivetta for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you a recap of the news and notes that we've seen in college basketball over the last 24 hours. How about Delaware getting on the board with another nice transfer move, as they're going to be getting Kazi Naseh. He was over last season at Little Rock for Kashai Naseh. He was averaging about 11.5 points, a block, 5 rebounds per game. He began his career over in the power conference ranks. He was over at Xavier and Penn State, really couldn't find his footing at either of those stops, but a guy that is 6'8", actually shot 41.5% from three-point range, should really help out a Delaware team that they didn't have a lot of depth last year. That was really their big downfall. They're probably going to be looking to play a little bit more up-tempo, and I like the moves that they've made. Steve Solano is a former top 350 recruit. That's a 7-footer that comes over from St. Joe's. Deshaun Harris-Smith, he's a former top 100 recruit, never worked out over at Maryland and Georgetown, but he's got a little bit of upside there. Chuck Bailey III was a solid scoring guard over at Nevada, so I like what Delaware has done after a few down years. It feels like this should be able to get the ship righted for them. They needed a little bit more low post play last season. They certainly addressed that with this move. Cayman Maker, he was over at DePaul last season, just didn't really see a lot of playing time whatsoever. At 7'1", he was only averaging about a point and a half, a rebound and a half per contest, but he heads on over to a Marshall program that they love to be able to have those big men, and they were able to do a pretty solid job with their low post, shall we say, defense last season. I think that he's going to be able to do a good job in terms of fitting the system for Maker. He began his career over at St. John's as well. Just a guy that is a little bit more of a project, so he's going to need to find a way to be able to help out his stamina, be able to stay out there on the floor. But go back to what Marshall had last year with Matthew Von Komen, guy that stood 7'4". He was solid over at Elon. He was able to give that team 2+ blocks per contest. I don't know if he can quite do that, but he should be a really nice defensive stopper. Offensive game, no doubt about it. It's going to be leaving a little bit of something to be desired, but I do like what they're doing there. Aram Sequai Obano, he was over at Fresno State this last season. Didn't see a lot of playing time. He was only averaging about 2 points per contest, but was a part of a Fresno State team that did a nice job locking things down from three-point range, was a good rock-solid defense, and he's heading on over to Merrimack. Now, Merrimack loses a lot of their top scorers from a season ago, so they're going to need to rebuild a little bit, but like the fact that they bring in Denver Anglin, who 2 seasons ago over at Rice was a solid three-point shooter. You've got Eli Wilborn, who's able to give you some nice rough and tumble down low from James Madison. That's always been the downfall result of Merrimack not being able to have anyone down low in terms of being able to hit the boards. And for Merrimack, I don't know if they're quite going to be the same team in terms of generating turnovers that they have been in the past, but it does feel like they've got a little bit more rough and tumble this year. So I do like that for them, and I do think that moving forward, this is going to be a rock-solid program. I like this pickup as well. Tolu Samuels, he has decided that he is going to be adding on over to Northern Illinois. He last year was playing over at Southern Indiana, and he was solid down low. 7 points, 8.6 rebounds per game. Not a guy that's going to stretch a floor and pop it and lock it from three-point range, but Northern Illinois is sticking some money here into the commits. They add in their David Douglas, who was a nice three-point shooter over Fresno State and UW Green Bay the last few seasons. Shaq Daughtry is a nice pickup. Uzziah Butin, he was a guard over at South Dakota. That was pretty rock solid as well. This is a Northern Illinois team that's still probably going to be towards the bottom half of the MAC. They have been for a very, very long time, but with adding in there a guy like a Daughtry, who was within the state over at Illinois State, who 2 seasons ago, he was able to be a nice offensive stopper, nice three-point shooter at 6'8". This team has a lot more versatility. They finally have a little bit of something that they're able to rely upon down low, because keep in mind, when they had non-encoder Niederhauser, who went on over to Penn State and eventually the NBA, they did have something there, and that was really the last time this program was respectable. So I like this move for them. I do think that that's going to be big. For Colgate, it's a program that doesn't get a lot of transfers, mainly because they're out there in the Patriot League, but Isaiah Skinn, that is the son of Tony Skinn. He began his career with his father over at George Mason. He's decided that he is going to be heading on over to Colgate. Colgate does lose a lot of their top players from a season ago. This is really their lone ad, but as we know with this Colgate system, they always do a nice job being able to find guys that just produce good, clean offense. They're a team that typically does a good job in terms of not allowing their opponents to get second and third chances. Never really a rock-solid team down low, so they're going to need to probably recruit some international man of mystery or something like that, because they really don't have a lot of size right now, but that backcourt play, it should be relatively solid. Another Little Rock transfer decided to commit over the last 24 hours. You've got Cameron Wallace heading on over to Southern Miss. This is a good pickup for them. For Wallace, 12.5 points, 7 boards. He is a native of the great state of Arkansas, so he's leaving his home state, but one thing that he doesn't do is shoot it from three. 5.3% three-point shooter, and for Southern Miss, that is something that they're really going to need to address, because I do like that they're staying true to their roots. They were a team that was very solid on the glass last year. They do a nice job in terms of being able to guard the inside, but this was a team that was also one of the worst three-point shooting teams in all of college basketball, and they look poised to be that once again this season. Right now, he, along with Marcus Overstreet, are your main two ads, and for Overstreet, he comes over from San Jose State, 6'9" big man. Once again, they're going to be very stout down low, and I recognize that in this day and age of college basketball, maybe you don't need 100 million billion three-point shooters or anything like that, but hopefully they address that just a skoge, because right now that is looking a little bit rough for them, to say the least, but certainly they have been able to fortify the strength of this program. You've got J.J. Massaquoi. He has decided that he is going to be heading on over to Southeast Louisiana after he had a nice year over at UMass Lowell. He was averaging about 8.5 points per contest. Now, it's the Southeast Louisiana team that they were absolutely terrible with their three-point shooting last year. Massaquoi's not going to help out with that. At 6'6", he shot a nice hearty 8.3% from three-point, so he'll fit the system perfectly. And for Southeast Louisiana, this is really their second ad. They're also going to be adding over another man from the East Coast, Gio Sanford. He was over at Bryant last season. Another guy that's probably not going to be delivering for you like a whole bundle full of three-point shooting or anything like that, as he shot 9% from three-point. So Southeast Louisiana, they're staying true to their roots. They were really good with their perimeter defense last year. They did a nice job in terms of just being able to D up in general. A team that also left a lot to be desired from the outside. It's looking like it's going to be that for them once again. Duran Buca, he last season was over at Kansas State, 3.5 points, 3.5 rebounds, was able to average a little bit over a block per contest. He's decided that he's heading on over to Rutgers. This is a good ad for Rutgers. This is what Steve Pikiell is all about. Adding these big men, not necessarily having a lot of sizzle, but having a lot of stake. He should be able to really help the team out down low, and they've gone big here. Christian Gurdrock, who was over at Virginia Tech, saw a few minutes for them. He's heading on over. Will Sidner was a nice 13-plus point per game scorer over at Manhattan 2 seasons ago. Just was not able to be eligible last year. Darren Smith Jr., 6'7" combo player, was really good for Central Connecticut last season. Heads on over. Louis Duarte has a little bit of versatility. Comes over from New Mexico State, and is Rutgers going to be competing for like some sort of top 5 spot out in the Big Ten? Heavens no, but they're better right now than where they were a season ago. Recognize that they do lose a few of those top guys from a season ago as well, but I like what they brought in. This is more of a just Steve Pikiell style team that can be pesky. I don't think that they're going to be picking off a lot of the top teams out there in the Big Ten, but I think that they can be pesky, perhaps be able to cover some of those double-figure spreads. So I think that this is a good move for them. Nate Johnson, he was over at Detroit last season. He has decided that he he is going to be heading on over to Alabama A&M. For Johnson, we just saw him really not be able to get a lot of minutes recently over at Detroit, as he was very solid in his freshman season. That first season, he was a starter for them. He was putting up their 8.5 points. She only shot about 30% from three, but was able to give the team about 4.5 rebounds per game. Just did not see minutes this last season over at 6'5", and I do think that he's going to do a nice job in terms of fitting the Alabama A&M system. It's based around having a lot of versatile pieces, this Alabama A&M system, because they pretty much bring over the Grambling style with the moves that they made last offseason. They're going to be built around playing a relatively slow style, being good defensively, having a little bit of switchability. You should be able to fit in with what they've already got. Devin Brown is heading on over from Coastal Carolina as a 6'8" big man. Javonte Edwards was glued to the bench over at Canisius, but you should be able to give the team a little bit of facilitation. Some solid moves here for Alabama A&M. I don't think that's anything that's going to light the world on fire, but still, I do think that they've been able to do a solid job in terms of being able to have some good ads here in the offseason. Joe Chappelle, he was over at Georgia State last season, and he has decided that he is going to be heading on over to Tulane, 7.5 points, right around about 5.5 rebounds per game. And this is very interesting because it looked like he was going to be going elsewhere. He decided that he is going to be rearranging his commitment because he was looking like he was going to go to Indiana State, and that was going to be really the main big man, in my opinion, for Indiana State. So this is a big giant flipperoonie for a Tulane team that they just haven't had a lot of depth over the last few seasons. They always have relatively solid guard play. For some reason, they shot so much worse from three-point range when they were at home rather than away from home last season, but they certainly need to fortify down low. He's averaging about 5.5 rebounds per game, and if you're relying upon it, this guy as your main big man out there in the American Conference, I think that you've got another thing coming. The other two ads that Tulane has had, TJ Nidu was a nice three-point shooter over at Detroit. Christian Lewis, he was a stat sheet stuff for 17-plus points, 5-plus rebounds per game over at Louisiana Monroe. So Tulane, they still need to add some depth. I still feel like they need a lot more size as well, but this is a step in the right direction for them, and that's a big loss for Indiana State, who looks like they might be towards the bottom of the valley here this offseason because, man, I really don't look at this roster and see you very much upside there, but I do see some upside with this. For Portland, they're bringing in Jackson Oliveira. He was over at Louisiana last year, one of the lone guys that could stay healthy for that Louisiana team. 13.5 points, 4.5 boards, pair of assists per contest. He heads back to the West Coast. He actually began his career over at Pepperdine, and last year shot about 35.5% from three, career 34.8% three-point shooter for a Portland group that they did have some struggles with regards to just their overall, shall we say, clean offense last season, just way too many turnovers, and it's very clear that they're going to be looking to do some three-point shooting with Hunter Adam coming in over from Davidson. He was a high 30s three-point shooter over at Davidson at 6'7". You've also got Vito Petrovic, who comes over from East Carolina at 6'10". So for Portland, they do lose a lot of those good pieces like Joe Foxwell and company from the season ago, but I do like this move for them, and I do think that they're adding some solid pieces, and now they don't have to worry about Gonzaga in the WCC, though they did knock them off last season, so a little bit of credit there. How about what Western Michigan has been able to do in the transfer portal? They get another nice ad on Tuesday in Tanner Hayers. He was a double-figure scorer over at Southern Utah, and for Western Michigan, they did a absolutely amazing job, in my opinion, here in the offseason because they have really went the UT Rio Grande Valley route, bringing in Cahill Fennell, who was the coach over at UT Rio Grande Valley, had some good success there over the last 2 seasons. He brings with him Julian Gomez, who was a nice three-point shooter that's able to handle a little bit. Jalen Washington, who was one of the keys to that offense in the Southland Conference, brings over Hot Rob Lee, Dinas Claudulis, who was a double-figure scorer over at VMI 2 seasons ago, was solid over at Colorado State this last season. He follows him, Isaac Finstelston. He was a nice big man over at Hawaii this last season. Mason Bettinger, he was solid over at USC Upstate. Now this really completes a puzzle, in my opinion, with Hayers. He's able to give you some versatility and shot 46% from three-point range with 10.5 points per game this last season over at Southern Utah. I don't think that Western Michigan by any means is going to be able to win the MAC, but I mean, they've been a team that has been down for a very, very long time. Arrow all of a sudden very much trending upward on this program, so I love the moves that they've been able to make, and this is really, really big for them, in my opinion. You've got Shadelier Newton. He was over at Abilene Christian this last season, part of a team that was just so good in terms of generating turnovers. 10 points, a little bit over a steal per contest. Not a guy that's going to light you up from three-point range, but he's decided that he's going to be going to Tennessee Tech, and Tennessee Tech is another team that has had a really nice offseason. They bring in Fairleigh Dickinson's former coach in Tobin Anderson. As we know, he only got 2 years over at Iona. I felt like he deserved a little bit more of an opportunity there. And Tennessee Tech, they're making the move to the SoCon. They're spending like it, bringing in Caleb Hollenbeck, who is a nice presence over at Marshall. Is able to give you some rebounding, give you some score. Devontae Hackett, boy did he hack it at Stone Hill. He was averaging 12 plus points per game. Deontay Green saw some solid minutes over at South Florida over the last few seasons. Trent Mascara, double-figure score from Lemoyne. Caleb Sanders didn't really get a lot of minutes over at South Florida, but highly touted guy. Now you bring in someone that should be able to help out this defense, should be able to give you some switchability with that regard. I like what Tobin Anderson is building. It looks like he's building this roster much in the way that he built up Fairleigh Dickinson when they knocked off Purdue in the NCAA tournament, so absolutely love this. And for Oregon State, they just absolutely love size. Peter Pensis, he was over at Providence last year. He's a 7-footer that just really didn't get out there on the floor. He has decided that he is going to be adding on over to Oregon State. You just take a look at the size of this team right now. You had that 7-footer. Dennis Evans is a former top 25 recruit of Louisville, played at Grand Canyon, didn't see a lot of playing time. He's 7'1". They're also bringing in Xavier Stin, a former top 75 recruit of BYU. He's 6'10". Jackson Rasmussen is a 6'7" combo player, and the main guy for Idaho last season. Deshaun Gorey at 6'6" was able to average 7+ rebounds per game over at Fresno State. Legend Smiley, he was a legend of being able to give you 8 points per game at San Francisco. Love what Oregon State is doing, getting back into the Pac-12, so another good move for them, and a little bit of a depth piece on that front. Elijah Duvall, he was over at Southern Utah, and he made his commitment as well on Tuesday as he's decided that he is going to be going to UAB. Another nice ad for Andy Kennedy and this UAB team. For Duvall, 15 points, 4 boards, 3.5 assists. Not an amazing three-point shooter at about 32%, but UAB is always a program that they look to prioritize pounding the ball inside. For the program that he comes from, Southern Utah, they were a team that really pushed you off the three-point line as well, so I think that that's going to be a really good fit with this UAB team. And for UAB, it was a little bit slow going in the portal, but now they put up there some really nice ads. TJ Caldwell, 8+ point per game score over at Arkansas State last season. Alexis Alston, who is over at Maryland, didn't see a lot of minutes, but he is 6'10". He's a nice little project player. Justin Fernandez should be able to help out that three-point shooting that was so lackluster last year at 6'5". Nice 15+ point per game score at Delaware last season. Deuce Jones, he was the A10 Rookie of the Year 2 years ago at St. Joe's in the games that he played before he decided to leave the program. It was a tumultuous situation there. He was averaging 13+ points per game, so UAB doing a nice job being able to build up a solid roster here. And then if you got Spencer Wayway, he was over at Quinnipiac last season, 7-footer that was a starter for the team. He was averaging 5 boards, only about 2.5 points per game, but a block per contest. He has decided that he's going to go to Hofstra, and I love this move for Hofstra because when you think of Hofstra, you think of the great guard play with the likes of Cruz Davis and company from the last few seasons, but Hofstra over the last 2 seasons has been a top 20 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. They've been really good with the likes of Silas Sunday and company down low, and now they had in there a second 7-footer because they also added in there Emmanuel Zugalov, who was a solid low post presence over at Youngstown State. Tanner Thomas, he was off last season, but 2 years ago when he was playing over at Sacred Heart, he was a guy that at 6'6" shot over 40% for 3, double-figure score. If DeWilk Tavares can get back to where he was over at Florida Gulf Coast, along with in the MEAC, he's going to be a rock-solid player. Justin Moore is able to give you more in the backcourt. I love what Hofstra has done. They should be towards the top of the Coastal Conference once again this season, and Speedy Claxton really has things going speedy and going very, very smooth out there. Pedro Santos, he was over at UT Martin this last season, averaged about 7 points, 4 boards, steal and a half per contest. A good defensive player. He heads on over to Albany. Albany was a team that was getting absolutely cooked with regards to the turnover battle last season. This is going to be able to help them out quite a bit. Not a guy that's going to light you up from 3-point range, and losing Amir Lindsey for Albany is certainly going to hurt. For Santos last year, only about a 28.5% 3-point shooter, but at 6'7", he's going to be able to give them some various options. Albany was not necessarily the world's worst team down low either. They're also bringing in their Ben Michaels, who is at Vermont. So it's a rather limited class as of right now, but the moves that they have made, I feel like are pretty solid. So would like to see them add a little bit more. They're going to need a main facilitator. Also, they're going to be probably having a lot more turnover issues, much like a season ago. But this one, I think, is a good one, and they're starting to fill out that roster. And for Temple, we give our to Lane Kiffin go Owls. It's been a little bit slow going for them, but they've been able to get on the board here over the last few days, and they add in there Jordan Marsh, who last year was playing over at USC. Marsh's, shall we say, peak was when he had a massive year over at UNC Asheville a few seasons ago during the 2024-25 season. 18.5 points, 3.5 assists per game. He only shot about 30% per 3, actually up that to about 36% 3-point shooting this last year over at USC. And while he wasn't a starter, he was averaging about 7.5 points, pair of assists per game. Part of that was out of necessity because he had so many things happen with USC, and that was a bad situation to say the least. But I mean, for Temple, I feel like he's going to be able to do a nice job in terms of fitting the system. Still not necessarily the most polished three-point shooter, and for Adam Fisher, I think that he does need to find some really, really good three-point shooting, because it feels like he's had some good but not great three-point shooting in his time over at Temple. We'll see if that system ever gets online. They added in their Jason Drake over the last 7 days as well. He was a guy that over at Indiana really wasn't able to find his footing, but I think that he has some upside. They added in their Cam Scott from South Carolina as well. There's a lot of guys, Saints, Des White, that were over at power conference schools that they were relatively role players, but I think that going down a level, they could be a little bit more complete, and we've already seen it with Marsh at the mid-major level, so do like that for them. And then you've got a guy that has decided that he's going from the D2 ranks up to the D1 level. Futon Williams Jr. He has decided that he is going to be going to Southeast Missouri State. He was really good for West Texas A&M. He was averaging 20.5 points per game, a solid three-point shooter for Southeast Missouri State. They need a little bit more three-point shooting. He's a relatively solid defender as well. Southeast Missouri State has been built around being able to generate turnovers, being able to own the glass. I think that there's a chance that they're going to be able to do so once again this year. They've really formed themselves as one of the better teams out there in the New Look Ohio Valley Conference, because that has taken on a little bit of an identity of its own the last few seasons. And we have seen for this Southeast Missouri State program, they haven't added a lot of pieces here in the offseason. They also added in their Darian Sutton, who is a 6'9", little bit of a shifty combo player over at Missouri State. But I do like the adds that they've had, and they do have some good roster, shall we say, retention from a season ago as well. And then I think that this one is going to be a nice depth piece for Virginia. I don't think that they're going to be relying upon him for Mondo minutes, but Christian Harmon, he was over at Arkansas State last year, 12.5 points, 3.5 boards, 2.5 assists per game. He has decided that he is going to be heading on over to Virginia. With Virginia, they're going to be retaining a lot of guys from a season ago, like the Darius Ritter. The fact that they were able to get him back, I think, is very big. They do add in their Jerian Dixon. He's a double-figure scorer for UC Irvine, Zot to the Anteaters. And now you've got a guy in Harmon who is a 6'6", sort of a guy that's able to guard multiple positions. There was a lot of positionless basketball played over at Arkansas State. A capable shooter, 82% at the free throw line, 34.5% from three-point range. So this is a nice depth piece to be able to fill out that roster for Virginia. I do like that for them, and it looks like they're poised to be back towards the top of the ACC. Don't know if they're dethroning Duke or Louisville, but I do like that. And then for Tulane, they were able to get another ad late in the day on Tuesday as well. Jordan Dumont, he was over at VCU this last season, just was really unable to get out there on the floor. Began his career over at Villanova as well, as yet to really be able to find his footing. 6'8" guy that is a career about 35.5% per three-point shooter. He heads on over to Tulane. Again, would like to see them add a little bit more size, but at the very least, they're adding a little bit more depth. Tulane was very slow going in the portal, but now it feels like they're starting to form a little bit more of a roster, and a lot of these rosters are starting to form, and I'm looking at all of it right here on this podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops. Every single day, I'm recapping all that we're seeing in this great sport of college basketball. And once things settle down, I'm going to get you guys a conference preview for every one of these 32 conferences. So if you do like hearing from this fine podcast, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at Jude_81. Keep in mind, letters they mean that's how it matters. So as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Big thanks once again to Ivetta Abramyan. She does such great work over at Practitioner.org. She joined me in the last segment, coming at you guys every single day on this podcast. And once the season gets back up and running, getting you guys picks and analysis on every single game, every single day. So appreciate tuning in today, and I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.